Welcome back to Nuggets of Gold. We are a daily podcast and YouTube. So from now on, if you guys have been listening on YouTube format, we're actually going to be uploading daily podcasts, and it's going to be one segment every day. So about 10 to 15 minutes a day of content. That's the plan moving forward. Today, Aiden is not on. I have Mike on with me.
How's it going?
And we're going to be discussing Trey Lance versus Justin Fields. Now, I'll start out by saying I really like both these quarterbacks. I had them as my 2 and 3, and then eventually 2A and 2B. I had Lance a little bit ahead of Justin Fields. I love both of them. I think they're both very good players. And I'll let you start out, Mike, because I know you have a little bit of a different take on the Bears than I do. And obviously, I'm wearing my 49ers hat. I'm a 49ers fan. I love Trey Lance. I was super stoked that they took him. However, I did think that they were actually going to go with Justin Fields at the third pick. I was not expecting Trey Lance to be taken there. I was happy about it, but I also, was expecting Justin Fields to be the guy, and I was very comfortable with him being that guy. But Mike, what is your thought right now on Justin Fields? And we'll discuss him first, and we'll actually give me both of your what your thought on each of these guys is, and I'll kind of respond and see how I feel. And let's talk about just them as players first, and then we'll get into their situations.
Right. So kind of like you, I had Justin Fields and Trey Lance at 2 and 3. I had Fields at 2 and Lance at 3, but I knew it was pretty close. There wasn't much of a discrepancy between the two guys. I felt that, during the pre-draft process, Justin Fields especially was really, his draft stock just plummeted for no reason. I felt this guy really should have been a top 5 pick. When the Bears took him at 11, I thought it was a stroke of genius to get a guy that talented. I mean, you guys got Trey Lance at 3, to get Justin Fields at 11 was awesome. But both of these guys are super, super talented. They're great athletes. And that's kind of like the new breed of quarterback. Great athletes. They can throw the ball over the field. They're accurate. They can do all the things you like. So to have two guys this super talented to go within 8 picks of each other, I just think it shows how well the league is progressing at the quarterback position.
Yeah, so I like both these guys a lot. Definitely had some questions about each of them. Less about Justin Fields, I think, than Trey Lance, but I see a lot more upside. I see a lot more talent in Trey Lance. And like I said, that's not to knock Justin Fields. I love Justin Fields. Question for you, Mike. One thing I've noticed early on in training camp with Trey Lance, and I think this matters a lot, is that his motion looks a lot more refined. And one of the questions I had coming out about each of these guys was that they kind of had elongated motions, and it led to some accuracy issues downfield. Now, don't get me wrong, Justin Fields is a very accurate quarterback, but sometimes it seemed like the motion was just a little bit longer, and it could get cleaned up and have a lot of improvement. On Trey Lance's side, he worked with Jordan Palmer, who I believe is the best quarterback coach in the world this offseason, and his motion is a lot more it used to be elongated and out far. It's a lot tighter, and it's a lot quicker, and he's driving the ball, and it seems like it's working. He seems a lot more accurate, especially in practice and whatnot, but he seems a lot more accurate downfield and kind of in the middle of the field well. How has Justin Fields looked compared to his time at Ohio State and now early on with the Bears in training camp?
I think it's very similar to what Trey Lance, because if you look at Justin Fields, he's got that really high release, right? He puts his arm all the way out here. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in college when you have perfect protection, you know what I mean? But in the NFL, sometimes these guys got to stay in these really tiny pockets. So to extend your arm that long, I mean, you're just begging a defensive lineman to come swat that ball out of your hand. So to kind of shorten it up a little bit and get a more compact throwing motion, something that both of these guys worked on. I actually have seen it with Trey Lance. I was actually going to mention it before you did about his, kind of fixed release. Justin Fields has done that too a little bit. I wouldn't say as much. But I do think definitely that both of those guys have made improvements through, training camp and the preseason to get ready for the season.
All right. Well, then what about these situations? And we can talk about, you can kind of give your take on where the Bears are now, because I'm not super high on the Bears. Obviously, I'm pretty high on the Niners. I think Trey Lance is in a fantastic spot. I think Kyle's one of the best offensive coaches in the game. But what are you at? What do you think about Justin Fields on the Bears, and what do you think about him going to that system? What do you think about that head coach GM combo of Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace?
I think personally that the Bears system is better than most people give it credit for. I'm a Matt Nagy believer. I really do believe in Matt Nagy. A lot of people have given up on him. A lot of people doubt him. And I understand the offense has not been great the last 3 years. I attribute a lot of that to just Trubisky just not being an NFL caliber quarterback. Not to really throw him under the bus, but I just think a lot of that was on Trubisky. You can draw up the best play in the world, but if your guy just doesn't execute it, then it's not going to work. So I really like Matt Nagy personally as a head coach. I think Ryan Pace is a good GM, but he's had real issues with quarterbacks. So, Trubisky was terrible. The Mike Glennon signing was terrible. Trading a fourth for Nick Foles was terrible. But obviously, with Fields now, if Fields is the guy, I think that Pace has done enough good in other positions, like Eddie Jackson in the fourth round, Tariq Cohen in the fifth, trading for Khalil Mack, signing Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, I believe, was a fifth round pick. A lot of real Jalen Johnson was a second round pick. A lot of really good players, taken outside the first round, good trades, some good free agent deals. So I think that he's a fine GM. I wouldn't say he's like elite, but I also wouldn't like say that he's fireable, assuming that obviously the quarterback is good.
Okay, and what are your thoughts on Trey Lance? What do you think about his spot? What do you think about John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, and that offense?
I mean, I hate to say this because I am actually a Seahawks fan, but it's just the perfect situation. Like it's perfect. You get a guy. If you think a couple years,
One thing real quick before you go. Anyone that's listening that hasn't seen Mike on before, Mike lives in Chicago and is a Seahawks fan. So
yeah,
he does support the Bears, but he is a Seahawks fan. Just
yeah,
have to
yeah.
make that clear because
So
you are wearing a Justin Fields jersey
yeah,
saying you're a Seahawks
yeah,
fan.
yeah, yeah. Um, I hate it as a Seahawks fan because if you look back to 2017, right, this reminds me a lot of Kansas City. They took Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes was that kid. He was raw, great arm, good athlete, but he was like an uncooked steak, right? And then you put him in that perfect situation. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, Andy Reid, you know what I mean? And he obviously is now one of the best players in our league, if not the best quarterback in our league. I'll see a lot of similarities with Trey Lance, and it scares the shit out of me. Kyle Shanahan's a great coach. John Lynch is a fantastic GM. They have Kittle, Ayuk, Debo. I mean, they have a good offensive line. They have a good running game. The defense is solid. Literally, it checks every single box for Trey Lance to be good. And I just don't see how this guy isn't a superstar in like minimum 5 or like maximum like 5 years. And it hurts, but you guys are putting him in a fantastic situation, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I mean that's music to my ears and all 49er fans' ears.
I'm sure you're
Um,
recording that and you're going to play it back to me throughout the season.
um, but I do like it. I think you're right. I mean, I think another box you kind of check is that he doesn't have to be rushed into a starting spot if that doesn't have to
Yeah.
happen. Similar to what happened with Patrick Mahomes, and that doesn't mean that like if he's ready to go, he's not going to start. I still think that he will be there. Like whenever he's ready, they'll give him the reins to the offense. It'll be his offense.
Yeah.
But Jimmy Garoppolo has looked really good in camp. Trey Lance has also looked really good in camp, and you see an offense that is very complete. They have multiple capable running backs. They have the best offensive line that's been there with Kyle Shanahan. They have Ayuk, who I think is going to be a wide receiver one in this league, and Debo, who isn't a slouch. You could say that George Kittle is the best tight end if you're talking about his impact in both the run game and the passing game. Definitely, if you're a Kelsey guy or a Waller guy and you think those guys are up there, I think you definitely have a case. But you can definitely make the case for George Kittle. He's the best at his position. Kyle Juszczyk is probably the best fullback in the game. And then, like I said, Kyle Shanahan is one of the offensive geniuses in this league. And then on top of that, you mentioned it, a defense that it's not perfect, but they have a very deep front seven, and they have a very,
Mm-hmm.
very strong front seven. And if they don't have many injuries in the secondary, and Fred Warner and Nick Bosa play the whole year, they're going to be a really good defense too on top of it. So I think you're right there. I love the fit, and I think out of all the teams that are drafting quarterback or looking for a quarterback this offseason, I think the 49ers were the best spot.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for Justin Fields, I don't think the Bears were up there. Doesn't mean that it can't work out. That's my
Yeah.
thought. Is I still
Yeah.
like Justin Fields a lot. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. I don't have a ton of faith in Matt Nagy. And I think you bring up Mitch, you bring up that stuff. I think it's fair. Like, it's hard to kind of evaluate a coach when you have a quarterback that bad. But my issue was you went back to him. You know what I mean? And we have talked about this before. And I know that they went and got Nick Foles. That was a disaster. Mike Glennon, that was a disaster. And now they kind of let Justin Fields just fall into their arms. So does Nagy have the chance to kind of save himself this year? I think he does. Because even if you're any Bears fan knows, like, Nagy is definitely on the hot seat.
Yeah.
I think people don't really haven't really accepted that. Like, he's on the hot seat, and that could be wrong, or that could be right. Like, we don't know yet. But but I definitely think like I'm concerned about that part of it for Justin Fields. I also will say one thing. I think Fields' best chance to be, like a great quarterback in this league is if Nagy is fired this year and if Eric Bieniemy takes over, because I think that is the best opportunity for him.
Yeah.
So I just think it's like there's a better opportunity that's available for the Bears, and that's kind of where I'm at with that situation.
Yeah. I I agree that obviously I would love to have Eric Bieniemy, but we don't know what's going on with him. He had opportunity. I don't know what's going on with him if he wants to stay in Kansas City, whatever. I think for Nagy's, a lot of people are saying he's on the hot seat. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but from the perspective that I kind of see it is we hadn't gone to the playoffs since 2010, and then we've gone two of the past three seasons under Nagy. Albeit one was 8-8, and we limped in and we weren't competitive. I understand that, but I think he's done enough to at least save his ass for this season. And another mistake that they were talking about, as in like the chairman and stuff, they said one of the mistakes they made was firing the coach after Mitch's rookie year because it like messed up Mitch or something. So I would be very surprised if Matt Nagy got fired this season. Next season, though, if we're struggling early in the season, I could definitely see it. But I would be pretty surprised if he got fired at any point during this season, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and we'll definitely see how it plays out. I'm not rooting for him to get fired or anything like
Yeah.
that. I just think that he's definitely in a tough spot, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think there are definitely questions. I think you would agree with me. There's definitely a lot more questions in Chicago than in San Francisco. Now, however, I think there's less questions than in Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville's a mess. I don't know. I think
The
everyone kind
Jets.
of have.
The
I was
Jets
gonna
are.
say everyone kind of looks at Jets and act like the Jets are in like great hands now. I think the Jets are not really in a good spot.
Yeah.
The Patriots are a good spot for Mac Jones, but I don't know. I don't think Chicago is the worst spot by any means, but I
No.
just think it could be better.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see how these guys' careers play out. Question, and then we can kind of wrap it up with this. Final thing I'll ask you: how many games do each of these quarterbacks start, and how do you think they look as rookies if you are expecting them to start?
All right. So I have a couple of trains of thought here. My first train of thought is back in 2017, we kind of had obviously different coaching staff. I get that. We had the whole same spiel of we're going to let Mitch sit, we're going to give him a year, we're going to ease him in, and then Mitch started by like week 5, right? I think for the Bears, you mentioned Matt Nagy is probably on the hot seat, right? The Bears have they have talented players that they need to make the most of. If Andy Dalton starts 1-4, 1-3, 0-3, whatever, and obviously Bears fans, every incompletion, they're going to be screaming for Justin Fields to get on the field. So I think at that point, it would just the fruit would be hanging, and they would have to pick it. They would have to put Justin Fields in. But on the other hand, if the Bears start off the season well, and the beginning of their schedule isn't terrible, it gets hard. It's harder in the second half. We have the Rams and we have the Packers in the first half, and obviously Packers divisional team. Other than that, it's fairly easy. I would say it's not like too crazy. If the Bears start off well, their bye week's week 9. I could honestly see Justin Fields coming in week 10, kind of like what the Dolphins did last year with Tua, is making the switch during the bye week. So I would say probably either week 4 or 5 or week 9 would be my two guesses.
So what exactly was the reason for week 9? I get what you're saying at the early on in the year where you can have them start out slow and he'll take over then. But why specifically week 9? Is that after the bye you said?
Yeah, week 9's
Okay.
are bye. Week 9's are bye. So like I would say probably name him the starter. That's what the Dolphins did last year. They named him the starter, gave him the week to prepare, and the next week was their game, obviously. So I would say those are probably my two guesses.
And then what's your thought on Trey Lance?
Honestly, if I'm Kyle Shanahan, and I can't speak, you obviously know more about this than I do. If I'm Kyle Shanahan and if I'm John Lynch, week 1, because unlike the NFC North, the NFC West is stacked. The Rams, the Seahawks, and the Niners are legit Super Bowl contenders. The Cardinals are probably a playoff caliber team. Like there's no slot, there's no just easy wins in this division, right? So if you're the Niners and you genuinely think by the end of the preseason that Trey Lance is the better quarterback, you have to put him in week 1. And I think Kyle Shanahan is creative enough to ease him in while getting him in the game. But his talent, I think, is too much, and I just think the Niners should play him. I think the Niners will play him week 1, honestly.
All right. Interesting. I think that I think it's very possible that that's the case. We'll see how it plays out. I would guess right now that Jimmy Garoppolo is the Week 1 starter.
Okay.
If Trey Lance starts Week 1, I have absolutely no problem with
Who
that.
do you guys play Week 1?
The Lions.
See,
and then the
like,
Eagles.
That helps. That helps my opinion.
No, I agree. I definitely agree.
Right. The Bears play the Rams, so it's like, oh shit, you want to put Justin Fields against Aaron Donald in primetime, his first game?
Yeah,
You know,
it's a little tough.
Yeah, but the Lions and the Eagles, I mean, it's like an extended preseason for you guys. I mean,
yeah, no, that's why it's weird, because you're looking at this team and you go like, all right, like they've shown they can win with Jimmy, and I think that's why at the end of the day they're gonna roll with Jimmy early on. But if they really think, because Trey Lance, okay, you can look at the first preseason game, and we were talking about this before we got on. Oh, Trey Lance went 5 of 14.
Trey Lance had a lot of drops.
He had 3 drops and he had 2 screen passes that weren't counted. So it could very well be, what is that? 10 of 18?
10 for 6. Yeah, 10 for 16.
That's a good number. 10 for 16. Yeah, whatever the case is. Sorry, 12 for 18. I meant. It's 66%, right?
Yeah.
So that would be fantastic. Everyone would be ranting and raving about it if a couple things go wrong that are out of his control entirely. So that's where I'm at with him. I think that, like, if he's ready to go and they want to start him, I'm not going to complain. I just don't think they're going to.
Mm-hmm.
Would I rather see Trey Lance? Of course, I'd rather see Trey Lance. Do I know that it helps them win right away? No. Could it? 100%. He has way more talent. And I think the big argument is, well, if you start him early on in the year and they get hot and they're a playoff team, and you have him going at the end of the year, that's your best chance. And I get that take, and I agree with that. So that's why I would be happy if they do. I'm not expecting them to, but I'd rather see Trey Lance sooner than later. And it's not like Jimmy Garoppolo is a bad quarterback. I mean, I think you have a lot of, in terms of quarterback talent, a lot of the starters in the NFL are above average talented quarterbacks in terms of like what we've seen the past 30 years, right? Like the quarterback talent level is so much higher. And Jimmy Garoppolo is pretty good if you look past his 30 years. But right now, like, Trey Lance's upside is unbelievable. Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to end up being like this top end quarterback. We've seen that.
Yeah, Jimmy G's got a lower ceiling but a higher floor, and Trey Lance is high floor, low ceiling, or low ceiling, high. Yeah, low floor, high ceiling is what I meant to say. Excuse me.
I think he has a high floor too. He doesn't turn the ball over. That's the big thing.
He's just really inexperienced though, and that's where I think the floor comes in. Yeah.
No, but I think that I would like to see him sooner than later. If he starts week 1, I'm hyped. I'm not wearing my Trey Lance jersey today. I have a Trey Lance jersey. I've misplaced it.
I forgot to show it off. We got the field.
Yeah. Also, I think we're about to wrap this up. But anyone, what we truly hope for is that the first time Lance and Fields play is in Chicago, because then we'll both go to that game, and that would be
in Chicago on Halloween. That's gonna be. We're planning on going to that game. Planning on it.
So that would be something that'd be awesome. But I think that's gonna do it for everyone. If you're just listening now, I'm going to be posting this on both the YouTube format and on the podcast format, and I'm going to be posting daily on both those platforms. So kind of changing up the show a little bit, but I think it's going to be a lot more content, talking 49ers football every day. So really excited for it. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow, and it'll be me and Aiden. So once again, Mike, thanks for coming on. Always fun to discuss these two really good up-and-coming quarterbacks. I think both of them have bright futures. I think you believe that as well. So a lot of praise for both these guys, Trey Lance, Justin Fields. Love it. So thanks for coming on, and we will talk to all of you guys very soon. Thanks, everyone.